Hi everyone, it's me again, George, bekpackr, and today I will be talking about COVID-19 and how it's affected daily life here in Singapore. And then I'll go into tips that I have based on my experience here in Singapore, and then I'll give some examples of how it's affected daily life. So what is COVID-19? So COVID-19, according to the World Health Organization, it's a disease caused by severe acute respiratory syndrome coronavirus 2. That's quite a mouthful. So that is what causes COVID-19. Just the other day, the World Health Organization, or WHO, recently declared it a global pandemic. It has spread at such global scale, affecting travel and livelihoods. So important resources. I get my information mostly from Singapore's Ministry of Health, which has been my trusty resource. They send WhatsApp updates as well, and you can check out their website, and they provide really detailed and concise information about the virus. For the Philippines, I would look at the Department of Health, DOH, for information, and I would also sort of get my information from a careful selection of news outlets, trying not to info overload, which is something I'll talk about later in this video. So in this next portion, I will be talking about tips that I could share from my experience having lived in Singapore during the outbreak of coronavirus. And I'm further splitting it into three categories. The first is daily life, the second is working from home, and the third would be how to deal with your mental health. Again, all of this is not professional advice, obviously, it's just based on my experience. The first would be to wash hands frequently. That's the most obvious one. So lately I've been washing my hands more and more frequently. Second tip is to make sure that you sanitize your living areas or where you spend most of your time. So I've been cleaning my table, I've been trying to change my bed sheets more often, and that's one thing that you could do. The third would be avoiding large gatherings and sick people. So that means we avoid going to cinemas, we avoid going to crowded shopping malls. My fourth tip is to always have a pack of tissues with you, a tissue packet, a box of tissues. I think I always have this theory that as long as you have tissues available next to you, you tend to use them more often rather than them not being there. So it's really useful to always carry a tissue packet when you're commuting, when you're at home. Put more tissue boxes everywhere. Put one by your bed, put one at your table, put one in common areas. It's really useful. My fifth tip is to always carry hand sanitizer with you. That's another obvious one, like I mentioned. My sixth tip is to wear masks, and only wear masks if you are feeling sick so you don't spread your own germs, and also wear masks if you are in crowded locations. I'm not in a crowded location now. You can look at this view, and I try to save my masks as well, because you don't know if there's going to be a day that you're going to have to wear it constantly, right? And my last tip is to stay updated always. You're not just consuming correct information, but you're also sharing the correct information. Try not to spread hype or terror, which would just fuel more miscommunication and anxiety out there, more stress for people. Next, I have some tips on working from home. So I've been working from home on and off for the past few weeks. So the first tip that I have is to stick to a schedule. That means you shower in the morning, you sort of have a fixed regular schedule. You don't roll out of bed at 12 o'clock. And if you could try to stick to a 9 to 5, that would be great. The second tip that I have is to take regular breaks. Sometimes when you're sitting at your desk at the table and you're isolated from your normal colleagues or your office mates, the struggle is real. You're just gonna sit there through answering email after email, working on your project. So it's best to take a break regularly. Maybe you could set timers on your phone when to set those breaks. The third is to leverage a lot of video conferencing technology. That should be very obvious. Now that you'll be working at home, it's great to, if your company, especially if you're not used to it. I mean, my company right now, we use video conferencing constantly, almost every day. So the adjustment to an environment where you have to speak to colleagues over the video is it's pretty normal. It's not too far-fetched. But if you can definitely leverage video conferencing. And since we're talking about video conferencing, it's okay to over communicate things on that note. When you don't see your colleagues every day, you have to expect that maybe some things can fall between the cracks, so it's okay to over communicate. My fourth tip for working from home is to make sure you create a dedicated space where you can actually sit down and do focused work. So that means try to avoid working on your bed or at your bed. build a part of your house or your room where you could sit down daily and sort of work and do focus work from there. An example is this corner that I built in my room recently, which has the desk. I put a desk lamp, and I sort of created like my own home office. That's one thing that I've been doing. And my fifth and last tip is to exercise self-care. So even if you're working from home, make sure you're dedicating time to take online classes, do some cooking for yourself. It's a very stressful time, so you have to exercise self-care, and that should be part of the whole strategy if you're working from home. So I have some 5 tips based on my experience on how I would deal with my own mental health issues when it comes to the coronavirus. So the first would be to exercise daily. Dedicate and protect time for you to exercise. That means you could go take a walk at a park, you could lift some weights while home, do push-ups. There's several apps out there that you could use. Second tip is to dedicate time talking to close friends or colleagues, or just talk to people, reach out. There are times that you'll feel really isolated when you're staying at home and avoiding large crowds, so try to reach out. So what I've done in the past few weeks is I've reached out to some of my close friends that live in like other places back in the Philippines, or they're in Thailand. So that's what I do. I try to reach out to them and have a conversation about life, and it feels good every time. My third tip on dealing with your mental health during this time is to try to dedicate time to learning something new as well. Take online courses. There's several resources out there like LinkedIn Learning or Udemy, and or you can go on YouTube. There's a wealth of videos out there on YouTube which could teach you how to cook things. So right now I'm trying to learn how to make beef steak Tagalog, which isn't so complicated, and I want to cook that ramdon recipe that was in Parasite, that Korean noodle recipe with beef. The fourth would be to stay hydrated and to eat well. I think that's important. Just drink water. It's very basic. That's what I would do if I were to deal with my mental health. I would definitely need to dedicate time to hydrating and to eating well. And my fifth and last tip is probably one of the most important in dealing with mental health during this time. It's to limit and filter the information that you receive about this virus. As you scroll down your feeds every day, you're going to be looking at so much information about the virus, about countries it's affecting, how many people are infected, how many people are dying from it, and looking at that information and being exposed to that information constantly is very, very stressful. So try to limit your information. Just stick to resources that you trust. One time I found myself watching Grace and Frankie because I just got overwhelmed like looking at all this information. So yeah, those are my 5 steps to how you could deal with your mental health based on my experience. Again, this is not professional advice, that's just based on my experience. Okay, I had to cut that one short because there was literally a solemnization ceremony happening while I was recording this. It's over there, and it's sort of proof that even in the time of COVID-19, it's still business as usual. I was talking about some of the measures that affect me every day. So if you go to the office, you're going to see more hand sanitizer. The cafeteria, there's a staggered lunch period now. It depends on which floor you're on. You get issued masks and hand sanitizer. You'll notice is the split team arrangements at work. When you go to the office, we can't gather in larger groups of 5 or more. All events, external and internal, have been canceled or postponed. Marketing conferences that we were planning to go to have been moved. Entire music events and carnivals have also been postponed. Booths everywhere. You can see Dettol by the MRT station. There's temperature checks everywhere when you go into a building, most buildings, and if once they check your temperature, they're going to issue like a sticker. Make sure that your temperature is not above extraordinary. On weekends, when you're at home, how it's affected daily life is that we avoid going to crowded shopping malls. So that means you see less of us going to Orchard, and although we do go to Vivo City because it's near my house, but we avoid the crowded parts of Vivo City. We would rather go to the roof deck where you can have a nice picnic there. Another way that we're affected is that we don't like to travel more often. The tendency is before, like, you could spend weekends in Malaysia, or you could go on a trip to Bangkok or go back to the Philippines. Now it's like out of consideration. You don't want to leave the country, which means that you end up staying at home for longer periods, or you stay at home the whole weekend, basically. That's life in Singapore during the time of the coronavirus or COVID-19. It's March. It's been about 2 months probably since it started to spread, affecting us here in Singapore, and now it's affecting life as well over in Europe. Never really experienced anything quite like this before. I mean, before in Singapore you get affected by the haze, and that's only happens for a few weeks at most. This is the first time in my adult life where I've experienced something like this. I mean, it's not like wartime, World War II or anything, but still, this affects daily life and it's affecting actual livelihoods. And my thoughts go out to those who work on the front lines, the medical people, the professionals, as well as people who work in very vulnerable industries like tourism, travel, aviation, hospitality. I mean, I've received messages that some friends are really affected. They have to take pay cuts or they have to work without pay for a while. This is affecting a lot of people out there, and the reason I made this video is just to share my experience of it in this era, in this time, 2020, to share my tips as well, and hoping for the best that in the next few weeks and months things will improve in Singapore, in Asia, and the rest of the world. All right, so that's that. See you guys. Bye bye.